Hey guys, Logan here from Popular Woodworking. I have found in the tool industry, we kind of have three different levels of tools. We have the discount store tools, then we kind of have the home store tools, the name brand tools, and then we have the professional or industrial tools. And I think there's a big difference in the quality of the tool and the ease of use in between those three categories. So today I want to show you a tool from the industrial or professional category that works really well for certain aspects of woodworking. And that's called the NSK EVOlution. So this guy is basically, if you think of a Dremel or a rotary tool, this is a professional or an industrial version of that. So we have a couple different parts here. Let me switch this off and I'll show you the different parts. So here we have the actual power unit. So this is the controller. There's no motor in this. This is basically just a digital controller box. We have the power switch on the front. We have our speed controller here. And then we have a fixed speed, and then we have a reverse, and then we have our input selection. And what kind of separates this from other types of rotary tools is that there is no flex shaft that connects the motor, which would generally be here, even though this is not a motor, and the unit that you hold in your hand. What we have here, though, is we have a digital cable that plugs in to the control unit. And then we have the motor here. So the motor is actually held in your hand and digitally controlled through the control unit. Now you can see here, I don't have any way to hold any sort of cutting head or anything else. This is just literally the motor, which is kind of cool because NSK makes a ton of different attachments that thread on to this motor. So the one that we're most familiar with, at least in a woodworking standpoint, is a colleted head, something like this guy. And this has a simple collet that releases to hold kind of the standard burr type or carbide tips that we think of when we think of rotary tools. And that guy simply locks in with a quick release lever. Now it's held in there. And this works really well for some general carving type things, whether it is coming in and dimpling a platter like this, maybe coming in and doing some simple carving, or even piercing a vessel. That's where I see a lot of really well-known professional turners that do a lot of piercing. They use the NSK unit to do pierced vessels, which is really cool. So apart from that kind of standard rotary head, we have a couple different attachments too. This one is a right angle attachment. So this is for some kind of general use where the right angle is much more comfortable for you to use. If you're deburring tools or deburring parts, or if you were working on the face of a platter, I could see this working really well because then you can hold this kind of like a fat pencil and it would work really well. And then another really nice woodworking type attachment is this guy. And this is one I really like, and it's kind of fun to use. And this is a fine belt sander. So we have a flat platen on the back, so we can kind of turn it over and have a flat reference surface. Or we have this area here that's spring-loaded, and that allows us to sand curved areas. And it works really, really well. Now, apart from this head, which is the standard head, on here, this guy will go up to 40,000 RPM. So this will actually go faster than most routers will. It really buzzes along. We also have this head here. Now you see there's a slight size difference between these two heads. The blue head is the standard 40,000 RPM head. This guy here, the green button one, is the high torque head. And that high torque head is much slower at a turtle's pace of 25,000 RPM, but it has increased torque. And this is good for any operations that you need to use something like a grinding stone with. So if we put this cushioned colleted head on here, We can see we have a 1/4-inch shank, colleted stone. So this would be really good for doing some general metal grinding or some deburring of parts like I mentioned earlier. And you could probably even get away with some 1/4-inch shank cutters on here if you're doing light cutting work. So what makes this different and, in my opinion, a little bit better than something like a Dremel? There's a couple of things. First is that this is extremely user-friendly. If you've ever used a Dremel in your hand or a different rotary tool, you know that after a couple of minutes of using it, your hand gets tingly, it gets itchy, my hand's just itching thinking about it. This guy has almost no vibration in your hand. It's unbelievable. When you're holding it and you turn it on, even though it's turning at 40,000 RPM, it's very ergonomic and you could sit here and literally use it all day without getting any hand fatigue. The other thing I like is that there's a foot pedal on it. So you can buy a foot pedal attachment and then you can use your foot to control the speed on it. You can set the maximum RPMs if you wanted to keep it at 31,000 RPM, or you can dial it up to 40,000. And you may have noticed as I turn that on, even though it's at 40,000 RPM, it's extremely quiet. If you've used other rotary type tools, you know they're screamers. They like to make a lot of noise and it can really wear on your eardrums. This guy, very quiet. So let's show how this guy works a little bit. So with the two different heads attached, we have inputs to select which one's active. So I have the standard head plugged in input A, 40,000 RPM, and I can use the foot control to turn it on. So like I mentioned, it's extremely quiet, very comfortable to hold. There's no vibration on it. So it's really something I could sit here and use all day long. If we switch that out for the sanding head, this one says on here maximum of 35,000 RPM. So we'll turn that down. Let's go 30,000 on it. And we can come in here and very quickly and effectively and efficiently clean up something like a little carving or any other places you need to reach with a small little belt sander. And this is a fairly coarse belt. This is probably a 220 grit, and they go clear up to 400, so you could really put a nice polish on metal parts if you were making little hand tools or something in your shop. So even though I have, 3 or 4 of the heads here, there's a bunch of them available. I think probably one that most of us will use in our shop is going to be this colleted attachment. And the collet comes in a bunch of different sizes. The most common probably for us would be 1/8 of an inch. And that means it will accept most of the bits that you'll get at home centers, so most of the name brand bits. You do just have to watch the stated maximum RPM on those and make sure you're dialing this to where it needs to be so you don't over torque those bits. And also, if you are using standard bits on this, you'll want to watch the load meter, and that's in the center of the dial. And as the load on this motor increases, you'll see that torque meter go up. And if it reaches the maximum for too long, it will shut itself down just to avoid damage. So something like a industrial quality rotary tool may not be something that every woodworker needs in your shop, but if you do a lot of carving or if you're starting to get into some artistic turning and want to do some pierced vessels, I think it's a really worthwhile investment, and your hands and ears will sure be glad that you made it.